Thank you, Jamie. Okay, can I call for the Sethering and any intimated apologies? Cheryl, please.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, everyone. If I just run through the date, if you can indicate your attendance, please. Councillor Graham Barton.
Yep, here, Cheryl.
Councillor John McGee.
Here.
Councillor Ellen Friel.
I'm here, Cheryl, thank you.
Councillor Elaine Cowan.
Here.
Councillor Maureen Mackay.
Present, Cheryl, thanks.
Councillor Peter Mabin.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Claire Maitland.
Here.
Councillor William Lennox.
Mullen here.
I've got apologies from Councillor Crawford. Councillor Neil Watts.
I'm here, Cheryl.
I've also got apologies from Councillor Drew Filson, Councillor Jennifer Hogg.
Yep, I'm here, thank you.
And Councillor Eileen Stewart.
I'm here, thanks.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Cheryl. We'll move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is the hearing procedure. We don't have a hearing this morning, so we don't need to go through the hearing procedure at this point, so we can move on to any declarations of interest, please.
Aye, thanks, Chair. Just for item number 3, due to previous conversations about this area of ground, might be the perception that I can't deal with this and the merits of the application. So I'd like to declare an interest there.
Because you're going to leave the hearing at that point? Okay, thank you. Okay. We'll move on to item 3 in the agenda, and that's the planning application number 23/0416/PP, application for planning permission for the siting of a storage container retrospective and a polytunnel and a fruit cage at site adjacent to the west of junction with water slap in Brookfield Grove, Fenwick, East Ayrshire. And can I pass over to David to take us through that one?
Thanks, Chair, and good morning. The purpose of this report is to present for determination by the Planning Committee an application in retrospect for the siting of a storage container, a polytunnel and a fruit cage, which under the Council scheme of delegation requires to be determined by Planning Committee as the application has attracted more than 10 objections. The application site is located to the west of Waterslap, Lake Fenwick, comprising the corner of a triangular field sitting in the rural area immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary. Currently, the proposed storage container is located within the application site, with the polytunnel, a raised planting bed elsewhere within the field, and will be relocated to the application site if approved. The site is bounded to the east by Waterslap and Brookfield Grove residential properties, and to the west and north by the remainder of the field, with the rear of houses on Main Road further north at a higher elevation. To the south and west is the rural area comprising of fields sloping gently upwards to the south. Further detail of the application site and the proposed development are set out at paragraphs 3 to 11 of your papers. The application supporting statement advises that the applicant has a specific interest in horticulture, which cannot be met in his own residential property, which is located near to and within walking distance from the application site, and the applicant maintains the area of grassland to the visual benefit of the area, and that the area of the field requires a storage facility for machinery. Details of the applicant's supporting statement are set out at paragraphs 11 to 14. Consultations are set out at paragraphs 17 to 20, noting that ARA are the only consultee and no objections are raised subject to sightlines being maintained. Paragraphs 21 to 35 contain the details of 11 objections to the development. The objections address matters including the location being unsightly and out of character, contrary to development plan policies, the use of the structures, the planning history of refusals of other applications, including for a storage container, querying the proposed horticultural use, that the application is a change of use, and granting permission paves the way for further development, amongst other reasons. Prior to moving on to the development plan section, I propose to take members through some plans and details of the development. If you bear with me, I'll just share my screen and talk you through them. So this first slide here just shows the application site position in relation to Lake Fenwick. You can see just where I'm circling the cursor there, it's in the corner of that small field just at the southern part of Lake Fenwick. A slightly more detailed view showing the site in the southeastern corner of the field with the applicant's land ownership outlined in blue, showing the rest of the field and also the residential property at Brookfield Grove. This is a proposed site plan showing the container and the polytunnel within the application site, located again, obviously in the southeastern corner. There's some details there of proposed landscaping elements that the applicant proposes could be planted as well to help screen the site. This is a detail of the polytunnel and storage container, and the applicant has noted that he's willing to paint the storage container green. At the moment, it's a grey colour, but he's happy to take a condition if members were to grant consent that it should be painted green to help blend into the local area. This slide is the local development plan settlement boundary, noting that the site is out with but adjacent to the settlement boundary, so it's outlined in the bottom there, just with the red circle. And likewise, this is the local development plan 2 settlement boundary. Also worth noting here that the site is out with the settlement boundary going forward, but we also show the potential future housing growth area close to the wider field within which the site is located, but that would be an indication of potential future growth for further local development plans, so it would be at least local development plan 3 before that site was brought forward. Just taking you on to some photographs now. This is the first one just looking up towards Lake Fenwick from the top of Waterslap with Main Road at the top. And this one looking from a similar location back down towards the application site, and you can see the container currently in position on the right hand side in that photo. These are various slides over the next 7 or 8 slides looking at the site from and around Waterslap itself. So you can see the container and location there, and also the polytunnel, and the polytunnel would move closer to the container if consent was granted. A closer look at the field and the polytunnel. And again with the container and the rest of the field there, and you see the ground sloping up behind. Some hedging along the edge of the field and looking across towards Brookfield Grove, just there across from the site. Again, looking from near the edge of the field towards where the container is sited in the corner. And a couple of detailed shots looking in towards the site at the moment. And that's just the back corner of the site. The polytunnel would be towards your left there. Slide 22 is just from the bottom corner of the field, so at the northern part of the field, looking up towards Lake Fenwick. And looking back down across the wider site again. Stop sharing just now, if you bear with me. The assessment against the development plan, which comprises National Planning Framework 4 and the Local Development Plan 2017, start from paragraph 36 to 66, noting that it's considered that development is contrary to a number of policies of the development plan, including policies 14 and 19 of NPF 4 and OP1, Res 11 and ENV 8 of LDP 2017. Primarily, this is by way of a lack of support in principle for such development within the rural area, the temporary and somewhat industrial appearance of the buildings being out of place, prominent and alien in the local landscape, and that the development is considered to have adverse impacts on the character and appearance of the local area. The key material considerations are set out from paragraph 67, noting in particular the planning history, which includes previous refusals for similar development, and the representations which raise a range of concerns, a number of which are considered to be pertinent. Implications are set out from paragraph 75, noting that if the application is refused, the matter will return to planning enforcement to progress action to remove the structures, and that any refusal could be appealed to the Scottish Government. Conclusions are set out at paragraphs 80 to 84, noting that the development is considered to be contrary to the development plan, and that material considerations, on balance, are not altogether supportive of the development. The application is therefore recommended for refusals for the reasons set out at pages 28 to 29 of the papers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. At this point, I'm going to open it up to members for any comments and questions. No, no further questions on that. So are we in a position to determine the application? Councillor Maitland.
I would approve the recommendations and go with refusal. Thank you.
And that's seconded by Councillor Friel. Anyone else? No, okay, so that's recommendations approved. Thank you.
Just to confirm, for the purpose of the minute, that this application has been refused.
Thank you, Cheryl. Okay, so I think we need to get Councillor McGee back in the room. Welcome back to the meeting, Councillor McGee. We're going to move on to item 4 on the agenda now. That's planning application number 22/0811/PP. And that's planning application under section 42 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997 to vary conditions 12 and 13 of planning permission 20/0001/PP to allow for an increase in the turbine tip height of turbine 8 to increase its maximum height to 200 metres and new infrastructure layout, including movement of access tracks and crane pads, which are proposed to be relocated at Harecraig, Muirkirk, East Ayrshire. And again, I'm going to pass over to David to take us through that one.
Thanks, Chair. The purpose of this report is to present for determination by the Planning Committee an application under section 42 to vary planning conditions on planning consent 20/001 PP to allow for a tip height increase of wind turbine and to revise the infrastructure layout. This requires to be determined by Planning Committee under the Council scheme of delegation as it is a major development. The application site is located on the border of East Ayrshire and South Lanarkshire, some 4.6 kilometres north-east of Muirkirk. The site is predominantly grassy upland moorland with an access track off the A70 which reaches the site through former open cast workings. The Muirkirk Special Protection Area and SSI is located adjacent to but out with the application boundary. Details of the site description can be found at paragraphs 4 to 6 of the papers. The application supporting statement advises that I beg your pardon, I'm reading the wrong paragraph there, bear with me. A recent planning consent was granted for a wind farm comprising 8 turbines between 150 and 230 metres high, and that consent remains live and capable of being implemented, as explained at paragraph 7. The proposal under this application is to vary 2 conditions under section 42 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997. Details of the section 42 process are set out at paragraphs 8 to 12, noting that any approval would be a new planning permission in addition to the existing consent. The applicant proposes to vary conditions 12 and 13 of the original consent relating to the implementation of the development in accordance with the approved plans and also the micrositing condition. The applicant, through this process, is looking to achieve revisions which will allow turbine 8 to be increased in height from 150 to 200 metres high, to revise the track layout and to revise the precise locations of some hard standings and turbines. Details of the proposals are set out at paragraphs 13 to 17. Consultations are set out paragraph 18 to 32, noting that no consultee has raised any objections, subject to the reimposition of planning conditions to address their specific requirements. Nature Scott also note the requirement for an appropriate assessment to be undertaken due to the proximity of the SPA and SSSI. Paragraph 33 notes that no representations have been received. I'll now take members through some of the plans for the development. So this slide just shows the application site in relation to Muirkirk and the local authority boundary, which is the hard black edged boundary on the right hand side of that plan. And it's a slightly more detailed look at the application site, showing the site access from the A70 and other land that's in control of the applicant as outlined in blue. The proposed site plan is set out here, noting the turbine positions, borrow pits, some temporary compounds, substation and the various crane pads and tracks that run through the site. This plan is an example of the overlaid development showing the previous development in a lighter grey. So you can see that there's a number of tracks in a lighter grey on the plan there, with the new tracks in a darker grey. This has been brought forward through further study of the site by the applicant and a more careful look at site levels in relation to the turbine suppliers about being able to properly access the site and minimise the amount of cut and fill that would be required on the steeper sections. I'll now take you through a small selection of the wire lines for the site, showing the changes. So this first slide is from Glenbuck, and the revised turbine height is shown in the red. You can just see the blade appearing just behind the landform there. So in this view, it's very much a minor part of the view. This slide is viewpoint 3 at the River Airway near Muirkirk, showing the revised turbine height in red. The blue turbine that you can see immediately in front of it and slightly lower is the old one, so there wouldn't be any stacking here. It would just be the red turbine equivalent that you would see. So there's not two sitting there, but they've done this to show the comparison of what they would look like. This one is viewpoint 10. It's the River Airway, some 13 kilometres west, which again shows the red turbine and the blue previously consented one sitting immediately in front of it. You can see the slight increase in height that's visible there. And this slide is viewpoint 13 from the B743, which is just to the north of Muirkirk, approximately 3.5 kilometres to the nearest turbine. Again, the turbine shown in red with the previous consented height turbine in blue shown there as well. Stop sharing the screen here. The assessment against the development plan, which comprises NPF 4 and LDP 2017, is set out paragraph 34 to 103. The assessment focuses primarily on the proposed changes advanced by the applicant through the changes to the conditions, rather than a complete reassessment of the wider wind farm development, given the application has been made under section 42. Having undertaken such assessment, it is considered that the development is largely compliant with the development plan, noting that there are no new or changed significant effects resulting from the changes and that the extent of peat excavation is marginally reduced. The key material considerations are set out from paragraphs 104 to 107, noting in particular planning history sets the principle of a wind farm at this location and that consultees have raised no objection to the development. Implications are set out from paragraph 108, noting that a revised legal agreement will be needed should members be minded to grant consent to secure an updated quantum figure for restoration and to capture the changes through this application. If the application is refused, there is a risk that any such refusal could be appealed to the Scottish Government. Conclusions are set out paragraphs 116 to 124. The changes sought by the applicant are considered to be acceptable when assessed against the development plan and material considerations. However, as this is a section 42 application, we are required to consider the matter of the conditions. In respect of condition 12, the approved plans are not within the condition wording, therefore any changes to the plans would not alter the condition. As such, no change is needed to condition 12, and that being the case under section 42, that would indicate refusal of the application. However, condition 13 references a proposed layout plan, and to secure the revisions sought by the applicant, condition 13 would require to be altered. As the changes sought by the applicant are considered to be acceptable, it would therefore be necessary to alter condition 13 to reflect that development, and as such the application should be approved subject to revised conditions under section 42. Finally, it's noted that some further minor revision to the conditions would be necessary to ensure that they meet the tests for conditions set out in Circular 4/1998 and also to reflect the development now proposed. This is set out at paragraph 124. A habitats regulation appraisal is set out at Appendix 1, starting on page 80 of the papers, which indicates that development will have no adverse effect on the SPA or SSSI adjacent to the site. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions 1 through 35 on pages 55 to 79 of the papers, and that consent be withheld until a legal agreement is concluded. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Now I'm going to open up to members for any questions, comments. No, I don't see anybody online. I'd be happy to approve these variant condition. Oh, Councillor Lennox.
I'd move to support the officer's recommendation, Chair.
And is everybody in agreement? Yep. Thank you very much. Conditions approved. Okay, move on to item 5 in the agenda, and that is planning application number 22/0132/AMC-PP, and that's an application for approval of matters specified in conditions PP for submission for approval in relation to condition number 2A, restoration plan of planning consent number 21/0623/PP at land at Ashmark Farm, Afton Road, Mossmark, Newcomnock. And David's going to be taking us through all of these, so I'm just going to pass over to David again.
Next Chair, you'll be tired of hearing from me by the end of all of this. So it's slightly shorter one, this one. The purpose of this report is to present for determination an application to discharge planning condition 2A of planning consent 21/0623/PP, which under the Council scheme of delegation requires to be determined by planning committee, as the application relates to the discharge of a planning condition relative to restoration and aftercare of the site. The application site is located off the Afton Road at Newcomnock and is shown on page 93 and 94 of the papers. Consent for an abnormal load access track was approved subject to conditions in March 2022, allowing access to the approved Penclow wind farm, which is all set out at paragraph 4 of the papers. The planning condition wording is set out at paragraph 5, noting that a restoration plan is required to be submitted and approved, providing outline measures for restoration of the temporary compound and part restoration of the track. Paragraphs 6 through 20 set out how the applicant would propose to do this for each element of the development. Consultation with Ironside Farrer has been carried out as detailed at paragraph 7, with details of the applicant's proposal and assessment for these set out from paragraphs 9 to 15. It is noted that various checks and surveys will be undertaken, that the PMO and ECOW would be employed to oversee the works, that the compound will be removed and restored, that the track will be narrowed to 3.5 metres in width, and a timetable to implement the works provided. Appropriate plans and documents to address environmental management have been set out in the applicant's submissions, and aftercare of 1 year of hydrological monitoring and 5 of habitat monitoring are committed to by the applicant. Implications are set out at paragraph 16 and only arise if the application was refused and participation in appeal procedures became necessary. Conclusions are set out paragraph 17, noting that it's considered sufficient to address the requirement of condition 2A, with the recommendation that planning committee approve the application to discharge the condition. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Again, I'll open up for members. Anyone online? So we're happy to approve. Okay, approved. Okay, move on to item 6 on the agenda now. It's planning application number 22/0164/AMC-PP. Application for approval of matters specified in conditions in relation to planning condition number 3A, financial guarantee of planning consent 21/0623/PP at land at Ashmark Farm, Afton Road, Moss Park, Newcomnock. Okay, David, thank you.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to prevent determination, the discharge of planning condition 3A, and also to seek delegated approval to approve Part B of the condition upon submission of the bond by the applicant. Under the Council scheme of delegation, this requires to be determined by committee because it's relative discharge of a condition relative to financial guarantee to secure restoration and aftercare of the site. The application site is as set out in the last report, located off the Afton Road at New Cumnock, and also relates to the consent for the abnormal load access track. The condition wording is set out in paragraph 5, noting that written details of a bond is required to be submitted and approved. Paragraph 6 notes that the applicant proposes a bond of £276,759, which matches the estimations of Ironside Farrer Limited, the Council's consultants, as noted at paragraph 7. The applicant has advised that waiting further approval of the finalised bond from Planning Committee would have commercial implications for their project. Assessment is set out at paragraphs 9 to 13, noting that the bond value meets the estimation of our consultant, that the guarantee mechanism is a bond which is an acceptable guarantee to the Council. These details are considered sufficient to discharge Part A of the condition. Part B requires delivery of the bond. However, approval of the finalised bond will add delay if it requires to be determined by committee, and as such, delegated authority is sought to allow the Chief Governance Officer to discharge Part B of the condition, provided that he was satisfied that the form and quantum of the bond are in alignment with Part A of Condition 3. Implications are set out paragraphs 14 to 15, and again only arise if the application was refused and appeal procedures were necessary. Conclusions are set out at paragraph 16, and the recommendation to discharge Part A and give delegated authority to discharge Part B are set out at paragraph 17. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Before I pass it on for any questions or comments, I think David's going to give us a wee brief explanation of the delegation of Part B. Thanks.
As members will be aware from recent similar occasions when we've had to get projects actually up and built and commenced. Following the open cast in 2013, Council took a number of decisions in the back of the McKinnon report in terms of a whole suite of recommendations about how we should tighten things up following the kind of regulatory failure that had prevailed there at every level, UK, Scottish and local. So part of the decision-making review included bringing back to committee the complete overview of all the arrangements in respect to all the bonds. That started with open cast and then over time has extended appropriately to include the wind farms and other energy projects of a similar type and scale. So this is a long way round because the delegated authority used to sit with officers to discharge the conditions, currently sits with committee, but as members will appreciate, when you get to the business end of discharging, and David and I have had a number of meetings on the Friday afternoon for the battery energy storage station as an example, which is on the agenda later this morning, to try and actually move these things along and get all the detail in to allow us to discharge, to allow them to go and do their due diligence and close commercial deals worth billions and millions, tens of millions of pounds. So we need that bit of flexibility once the bond is agreed in terms of its form, who the provider will be and the value, for them to actually put that in place. And the way it's all set up is the discharge technically comes on them submitting the bond. So what we're just trying to do is front load that and get the committee to agree on being assured that the bond will be in a form and from a provider and to a value that meets our requirements, is to allow me to then, on behalf of the council, actually discharge the condition formally on receipt of the bond, because we need that greater flexibility than waiting until they've produced the bond and having to come back to committee and show that in front of you. The battery energy storage station one, as I said, it's been weekly meetings as an example to get us to this point with about a week to go, and we will get over the line just as we got over the line with Penclow, North Kyle and one or two others in the last 12 months. So what I propose to do in due course, or perhaps the next Chief Planning Officer will do, will be to bring a report back at some appropriate point to revisit some of the actions taken what was now 10 years ago in the light of the open cast review, and maybe to try and reset some of the balance in terms of that delegated authority to discharge these in the future. But at the moment, it's part of our governance and scrutiny arrangements with small g, small s, part of the overall scrutiny and the oversight of the committee, and it's fitting, and we're happy to fulfil that for as long as that's the case. But we'll bring a paper to committee that invites committee just to take a fresh look at some of the arrangements and changes we made 10 years ago and decide whether they still are required now or whether there's scope to revisit some of that. But that's the long explanation for why we have to come in this format, and it's to get the balance of oversight by committee, but the flexibility and room to manoeuvre that they need in the boardroom to get deals done once they can demonstrate that all conditions are discharged. So it's just a kind of halfway house to make things work in practice. I say that, and I hope that I'll not repeat it again, but there's one or two of these in the agenda today, and it's a similar situation.
Thanks very much, David. Okay, I'll pass it over to members for any questions, comments. Councillor Maben.
It's probably for David. I'm new onto planning, so maybe I need training. Can you tell me why it's 3 separate items? It looks like there's 3 different planning permissions for exactly the same plot of land. Why that is?
They're separate planning conditions, so they're separate submissions. So we've got, for Painclough is a slightly unusual one in that there's a wind farm being given consent, but they subsequently came back to us to apply for a separate access track and 2 borrow pits as well. So we have 3 planning consents plus a Section 36 consent as well for the wind farm. And each of those schemes has to have the relevant conditions to control that development, hence why each of them has conditions on decommissioning, restoration and financial guarantees. So they're discharging the relevant conditions of each consent, hence why you have a number of very similar type applications in front of you, but they're actually all for slightly different developments, but part of one larger development. It's just the way the applicants applied for them.
Okay, quite happy with that, Councillor Maben? Yeah. Thanks. So any comments or not? So we're happy to approve the discharge conditions in Part A and delegate Part B. Thank you very much. So move on to item 7 on the agenda, and that's planning application number 22/0169/AMCPP, and its application for approval of matters specifying conditions in relation to condition number 5, brackets 1, financial guarantee of planning consent 21/0264/PP at land at Ashmark Farm, Afton Road, Moss Park, New Cumnock, K18 4PR, and planning application number 22/0170/AMCPP in relation to condition number 5 in brackets 1, financial guarantee of planning consent 21/0625/PP at Lamb Hill. I'm out of breath now. Thank you very much. Over to you, David.
Sorry, Chair, we thought we were saving time putting 2 into the 1 report, but it's obviously you that's suffering. So thanks. It's very similar to previous here. Again, it's for the looking to discharge part 1 of 2 separate conditions. These are the 2 borrow pits, the small quarries that were approved in connection with the track that we've just heard about. So again, we have the decommissioning and also the financial guarantee conditions on both of them, and we're looking to discharge part 1 of both of those applications and to have the delegated authority to approve part 2 when the bonds are submitted. Again, this is the Painclough access track, and these applications are for the financial guarantees to ensure that the 2 approved borrow pits are adequately restored. The planning condition wording, which is identical in each case, set out paragraph 5. That notes that written details of a bond are required to be submitted and approved. Paragraph 6 notes that the applicant proposes bonds to the value of £237,365 and £351,961, which matches the estimations of Ironside Farrer as the council's consultants, and that's noted at paragraph 7. The applicant is advised, similar to the access track financial guarantee, that again waiting further approval of a finalised bond has commercial implications for their project. The assessment of the submissions set out paragraphs 9 to 13. We note that the bond values meet the estimation of our consultant, that the guarantee mechanism is a bond, which is an acceptable guarantee to the council. These details are considered sufficient to discharge part 1 of both of the conditions. Part 2 obviously requires the delivery of the bonds, and any delay has that issue that David spoke about, and we're asking for the delegated authority of committee for both of those conditions. So that's the part 2 of condition 5. Implications again are the same, only if the applications were refused and there was any participation in appeal procedures, would any implications arise. Conclusions are set out paragraph 16, with the recommendation to discharge parts 1 of both conditions and to give delegated authority to discharge parts 2 of each condition when the appropriate bond is submitted to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And as David Mitchell already explained, this is the exact same as the last application. So if we get any comments or questions, not happy to approve. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to number 8, and the item number 8 in the agenda, and that is planning application number 23/0023/S36 AMC. And that is the application for approval of matters specified in conditions in relation to condition number 9. It's the outline decommissioning scheme. Obtained planning consent 22/002/S36 at Kilmarnock South Best, adjacent to Kilmarnock South substation. I'll hand over to David. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It's somewhat similar to the previous ones, albeit a different site. Again, this is looking for the determination by Planning Committee for the discharge of condition 9, which is the outline decommissioning scheme of the Section 36 consent for the battery energy storage site at Kilmarnock South. And again, this comes before you because it's a condition relative to restoration and aftercare of the site. The application site is located off Treeswood Head Road in the rural area to the southeast of Kilmarnock. Planning consent for a battery energy storage system was granted consent by Scottish Government in March this year, and that included condition 9 on the outline decommissioning scheme. The planning condition wording is set out at paragraph 5, and the applicant has submitted an outline decommissioning scheme to address the condition. Ironside Farrer, as our consultant in such matters, has reviewed versions of this document on 3 occasions, as set out at paragraph 7. The assessment is set out at paragraphs 9 to 14, which ultimately finds that the latest revision of the scheme contains sufficient detail to be considered to satisfactorily address the requirements and criteria of the condition. Implications, again, only if it's refused and participation in appeal procedures were necessary. And our conclusions are set out at paragraph 16 with a recommendation to discharge condition 9 at paragraph 17. We also have an addendum to this report. I don't know if you want to take that separately, Chair, or all together. As you get
If you feel like
happy
together,
to
yeah,
at least speak
through it. Go on.
Yep. Condition 12A of the battery energy storage consent relates to the financial guarantee for the development. The condition in full is set out at paragraph 23 of the addendum, noting that the details of the bond and delivery of the signed bond are contained within the one condition rather than split like the previous ones. As such, the applicant has been unable to formally submit an application to discharge this condition as they have not yet secured the finalised bond. The financial quantum has been agreed between the applicant and Ironside Farrer at £3.95 million, and the applicant will provide a bond to deliver the guarantee, and that's all explained at paragraphs 24 to 26 of the addendum. Paragraph 27 notes that we've previously encountered this scenario in respect of the Enoch Hill wind farm, where it was agreed that approval of the bond could be delegated to the Chief Governance Officer, as we've talked about today. As set out the recommendation, paragraph 28, the same request is made for this application in respect of the development, and again on the proviso that the finalised signed bond delivered to the planning authority was satisfactory in terms of details, wording, risk, and that the quantum matches the value agreed by the Chief Governance Officer at £3.95 million, which was noted by IFL as being reasonable. This reduces the risk of delay for the applicant and allows them to start on site. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Again, I'll open up to members. No one online, so we're happy to approve both of those parts, David. Yep. So that's condition 9 and 12. Happy to approve. Okay. Thank you very much. So that is the conclusion of today's business. So I'm going to wait, Councillor Lennox.
I don't want to prolong the meeting, but just for the main benefit, as time goes by, I'm assuming that the value of the bonds that we're approving here and stuff like that, what mechanism do we have to ensure that the value of these bonds continues to keep up with inflation and stuff like that?
Just to confirm, it's a good question, Councillor Leonard. The bottom line is they're all usually subject to at least a 5-yearly review, and therefore if there's any slippage, increased costs, etc., then that would be taken account. If there's been any changes through Section 42 applications, that would be taken into account. If they didn't develop bits, then that would be taken into account. Actually, if I remember right, with the battery energy storage station, the last one, they're actually requesting a 3-yearly review for reasons I'm not clear on, other than they've explained the market is such that they're finding it easier to get a 3-year bond than a 5-year bond. So that was no skin off our nose, because that's better protection, because it's a 3-yearly review, but the minimum is 5, or the maximum period is 5, and we would have a fresh go. They would have a go, what's changed. They would quantify it. IFL would look at that and would agree what any increased value should be for the next 5 years. That was part of the problem in the past. Going to be back to pre-2013, those reviews weren't happening. So either bonds were put in place and they were still there, but they were well out of value. Not just because of the increase in cost, more because progressive restoration wasn't happening. And therefore, instead of that covering one trench out of 10, it was covering 9 out of 10. So that gap was increasing. The cost might be increasing. And that was the problem the last time. And in some occasions, you know, and it's all there in the history. So I'm not opening up any, well, I'm opening up old wounds, but the bottom line was the reviews weren't always carried out, and bonds in some occasions had lapsed and not been renewed. So that was all caught with the new safety net that we rigorously enforce of a review of and a new bond in place at least every 5 years. But as I said, and if one organisation or one applicant or developer is now struggling to get 5-year bonds, we may see that they all move to 3, and that may become the new norm, but it's at least 5-yearly reviews.
Thanks, David. Councillor Lennox asked the same question at the pre-agenda meeting as well. Is there any further comments? Okay, then I'll close the meeting at this point, and thanks very much for the attendance, and I hope you have a great Christmas and a happy New Year. Thank you very much.